Welcome and good afternoon. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Legislative Hall remains closed to the public, and we are meeting virtually under the authority of the virtual meeting procedures adopted by the 151st General Assembly in House Concurrent Resolution Number 1. This meeting is being held via Zoom and broadcast on the General Assembly's House YouTube channel. If you have questions or comments about this meeting, please direct them to legislative.council@delaware.gov or call the Division of Research at 302-744-4114. Because we are meeting virtually today, I have asked Mark Catrona to call the roll for attendance and voting purposes. Mr. Catrona, please call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Dukes.
Present.
Representative Dukes present. Senator Hocker.
Present.
Senator Hocker present. Senator Lockman.
Present.
Senator Lockman present. Representative Longhurst.
Present.
Representative Longhurst present. Representative Mitchell.
Present.
Representative Mitchell present. Senator Pettyjohn.
Present.
Mr. Speaker.
Present.
Mr. Pro Tem.
Present.
Representative Short.
Present.
Representative Short present. Senator Townsend.
Present.
Senator Townsend present. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 members present.
Thank you. A quorum being present, Legislative Council is now in session. Before we begin, I want to note that I have verified the identity of each member of council to my satisfaction. With that said, the first order of business is approval of the January 27, 2021 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Dukes.
Yes.
Representative Dukes, yes. Senator Hocker.
Yes.
Senator Hocker, yes. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Senator Lockman, yes. Representative Longhurst.
Yes.
Representative Longhurst, yes. Representative Mitchell.
Yes.
Representative Mitchell, yes. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn, yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem.
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem, yes. Representative Short.
Yes.
Representative Short, yes. Senator Townsend.
Yes.
Senator Townsend, yes. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 yes.
Okay, thank you. Having received the required number of votes, the motion has passed. Next, I have the agenda saying Legislative Council report, but the script saying new business. Do we go to Legislative Council report first?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
My
I thought
apologies,
so, yeah.
Mr. Pro Tem.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, senators and representatives. Over the last few weeks, one of the news stories that has captured my family's attention is NASA's landing of the rover Perseverance on Mars. The pictures, video, and sound from the surface of Mars were awe-inspiring. For me, one of the most interesting aspects of the mission so far has been the message that was hidden in the parachute using ASCII code. This brought a lot of interest with my family, and particularly the message resonated with me. The message was "Dare Mighty Things," which is the motto of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That message got me thinking about just how applicable that motto is to what legislators and legislative staff do every day. So in thinking about my report for this month, I want to call out some of the staff in the division who have dared mighty things. I want to start with my Deputy Director, Holly Von Wagner. In the midst of managing the division during a pandemic, generally just managing the division, and a steady stream of drafting and research requests, Holly found the time to take our annual legislative drafting workshop, which would normally be in person, and reimagine it as a virtual meeting in the virtual world over 2 separate days. in February. Holly balanced the combination of new information and basic drafting concepts that in a very informative and successful way that I hope provides new and returning legislative drafters the resources for a successful session. It certainly has helped me. I want to also give a big thank you to two people who aren't on our staff, but who were instrumental in that, the code revisers, Dan Wolcott and Jamie Sharp. Their time, they give their time freely in co-presenting with us each year. They offer an invaluable perspective to legislative drafters about the need for accuracy, clarity, and uniformity in our legislation and in the Delaware Code. I want to also call out Debbie Gottschalk. Her expansive knowledge, hard work, and attention to detail are well known in the legislative branch, and now hopefully in Newcastle County government too. She spent the better part of 2 years providing legislative attorney services to the Local Service Functions Task Force, which was chaired by the Pro Tem and Representative Baumbach. Representative Baumbach called her out recently, acknowledging her work in exploring complex legal issues. She found a way to draft to the unique requirements that were necessary to successfully implement the task force plan to revise the way Newcastle County taxes and budgeting are handled, particularly with respect to local service functions. And she did all that while maintaining her normal workload of, I think at this point, hundreds of drafting requests. Donnie Sellers, our print shop manager. If you know Donnie, you know that he's not one who's satisfied with the way things are. He's always looking for ways that he and Bob and Nate can improve the service they provide to legislators and staff while saving the state money. This session, that's include rolling with the punches that COVID-19 has thrown his way and the printing world's way, but finding alternate sources to obtain envelopes and letterheads, that the legislators use every day. Equally, in that vein is our legislative librarian, Joel Rudnick, who shares Donnie's focus on improving service and saving money. He's developed the library's print holdings, including a nearly complete collection of the 1952 and 1974 versions of the Delaware Code, which comes in really handy when we're doing our legislative history research. He's also focused on increasing access and staff knowledge of the electronic resources that are available. Particularly last week, he held a training for all legislative staff using LexisNexis. And that seems well received. It's generated additional requests for training. And I want to also share the work that the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee staff, Mark Brainerd and Amanda McAtee, have been involved in. As you know, JLOSC is in full swing. They've held several meetings throughout February and are continuing to hold more in March. Amanda and Mark have been working over the last year to innovate the sunset process and products, including a massive overhaul that's made the reports more user-friendly. They've implemented a system for the public to more easily provide written comment, and they're working with the chairs to use technology to establish better communication among staff and committee members. And while we aren't engineers who have just successfully landed the most advanced rover ever on another planet, we are legislative process engineers who work daily to solve some of the confounding problems confronting our state. And that's pretty cool too, I think. Which is why I, like Alan Chen, who is the systems engineer with the Entry, Descent, and Landing Group, working on the Perseverance rover, feel very fortunate that in the end, I get to work at a place with the people who are both great engineers and great people, and we still get to dare mighty things together. So that's my report. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I welcome them.
Really like your Mars rover comments. Today we are 10 days away from Pi Day. Pi Day also happens to be Albert Einstein's birthday. And just a few short years ago, it was the day that Stephen Hawking passed away, and they both contributed to quite a bit of the science that is now used for space travel. And I think that's a very appropriate thing to point out there today. Thank you. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Catrona? I do not see any hands raised, so we can go to the Controller General report. Ruth Ann Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro Tem. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be quick. We just wrapped up JFC hearings through the month of February. And again, I cannot give enough thanks to all of my staff, as well as DTI staff who made everything run smoothly. They all worked through obstacles. We had snow days, we had constant schedule changes, we had technology glitches, and not a single one of them complained. They just did whatever had to be done and kept rolling. I think the process went fairly smooth, all things considered, and we are happy to have a little break in between as we move along. But during this break, staff is working through grant and aid applications, summarizing all of those and preparing to meet with the assigned legislators per each category. We received over 319 general and veterans applications this year, and the senior center application closes on Friday. We're expecting at least 43 applications through that as well. We had over 30 new applicants this year, and it sounds like there may be a few more still coming. So staff is continuing to work through those. We're also preparing for bond bill hearings, which will be the week of May 3rd. Bert Scaletti, who is on the call today, is taking lead on getting all of that scheduled and ready, and then we'll get that posted publicly once we get a little closer. DFAC meets on March 15th, so that will be our next check on revenues that we can look forward to making a path forward in the operating budget. Operating budget markup begins on May 24th. It is on the calendar, I believe, for 2 weeks. So again, we will schedule that accordingly once we're closer to that time. And then one thing I did want to note is in your packets, there was a small presentation of IT related projects. That should give you an update from the IT governance board that meets monthly, as well as from Janet Roberson, who is on my staff. That should give you just a little check-in of all the projects that are in place, including the registrar's office, the website updates, things like that. If you want to take a look through and have any questions, please let us know. And then finally, we did post our legislative analyst position. We're excited. We have interviews scheduled for tomorrow, so hopefully we will be able to hire that position very soon and have our final analyst member on board in the next month or so. Mr. Pro Tem, that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. There's a bill working its way through Congress that I believe has $350 billion aid to local, state and local governments. And there's not a lot of clarity right now on what that is, but what is the Office of Controller General's role? I know OMB will get the number, but do we, how is our oversight of one, that number, and two, how those expenditures are used?
So there is kind of a check that happens. The State Clearinghouse Committee receives all federal funds that come through. Controller General and staff is on it, as well as the Joint Finance Committee chairs, as well as other appointees from the Speaker and Pro Tem. So once those federal dollars, once it's decided what is coming, it will come through that committee, and we will be able to take a closer look and report back on expenditures and actual revenues coming in.
How long does that take once something passes at the federal level?
It can vary with a lot of like the CARES Act funding. We try to get through them as fast as possible. So OMB would call and say, hey, can we schedule a clearinghouse meeting a little earlier this month so that we can get this money received and distributed out as soon as possible.
Any questions for Controller General?
Danny Short, I have a question along the same line, Senator, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Ruth Ann, is there actually a detailed listing of what all those expenditures are on that CARES Act? And the reason why I asked, I got a notification in my state email from the state treasurer, but it was more of a board with just a general number of what the total was, and then filtered down through all the department. I don't know if you saw that or not. Kind of added back up to the total, but there's nothing clickable. There was nothing other than the numbers for each department that was the allocated from the $900 million that we got. So I was wondering if there's like a checkbook somewhere or any more detail than just a big number.
So I know that the Department of Finance had done something to try and break down where all of that money was going. But I will follow up with you and get you what we have. Because I know that we have also requested additional details from OMB as we've gone along, because we've gotten several other legislator inquiries.
Great,
But I will
thank you.
get back to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Okay. Ruth Ann, I've heard nothing but positive comments about you and Bert and the staff, and just want to ask you to keep up the great work. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
So now we go to new business, and Mark Catrona back on to Legislative Hall upgrades.
Thank you. I'm gonna hopefully go ahead here and share my screen. So bear with me. Can you all see the presentation screen? All right, let's see if I can do this right. All right, well, we're gonna have to go this way because, all right, so I wanna begin by talking about Legislative Hall upgrades. That many of these upgrades were in process when we, before COVID-19 hit. And these were things we'd like to move forward with now as we're coming to a point where we may be reopening the building and having more staff in. All right, so I think, which screen are you, I really apologize, which screen are you seeing?
It looks like the grid replacement one.
Okay. Are you seeing a black screen with 2 slides at the same time? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Hold on one second.
Mark, if you select up at the top of that screen that you were just displaying, there should be a drop down that says swap displays.
Okay.
You see it at the top?
Thank you, Angel. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. And how about now?
Got one.
Are you
I
seeing?
think that's what you're looking for, yes.
Angel, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. I apologize, everyone. So I'm going to start with ceiling tile and grid replacement. What you're looking at is a view of the ground floor hallway. Facilities management, as part of the HVAC upgrade, tacked on a replacement to the ceiling tiles and grids in this hallway, also a lighting upgrade. And if you've come to Legislative Hall and been down the ground floor, it looks fantastic. What that did do, however, is highlight how not so fantastic the grid and ceiling tiles are in other places in the building, on the ground floor and otherwise. And so what we have done is reached out to facilities management to talk about a grid and ceiling tile replacement throughout the rest of the building where it's needed. Facilities management is either in the process or has procured a quote for us on that. And so what you would, I don't know the exact ceiling tiles and the exact grid that we're going to get throughout the rest of the building. I think it may be what you're seeing here on the screen. Just kind of by way of example of what we see elsewhere in the building. This is from my office. Ceiling tiles, these older ceiling tiles are starting to, in my opinion, not facilities, but reach the end of their life. They're folding and also suffering from, this is the library, leaks and general dirt accumulation. These are not as nice as the ceiling tiles that we just got in the ground floor. They are quite old, is my understanding. And I think in some places in the building, they are collapsing. There may have been a collapsed ceiling tile issue on the second floor recently, from what I've heard. So one of the things we'd like to do, probably as a priority one before we return to session, if that's possible, is replace the ceiling tiles and grids in places identified by facilities management throughout the building. Any questions on that before I move to the next?
Mark, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the slide prior to this with where the grid or where the event was being showed? Is that go back? Yeah, there you go. Dealing with this in my other job, has the markings around that vent been confirmed whether or not that's dirt or mold?
I don't know that is any of that. I think that might just be the ceiling tile deteriorating. I don't know if our facilities management friends who are on the call want to jump in and provide an answer to the concern with this photo or more generally throughout the building.
And the only reason I bring that up, having seen that in the past, that's where mold, when it actually leaves the venting system, that's where you're first going to see it.
Yeah, Mark, I'm not sure if you can hear me. This is Don Girardi.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I will answer that question if you wouldn't mind. That particular photo you're looking at right there is just nothing more than where the tile was cut and fit in there around the vent. But yeah, we are fully aware of the possibility of mold. And again, everyone's aware that we went through the whole mold issue back, I think it was back September last year when we had a lot of rain and mold issues in there, but that's all been addressed since. And again, to Mark's point is, the tiles most of the tiles in the building have been in there for many years. And we would, we agree with Mark that we would like to go through and, use the same style tile as we did in the ground floor, along with the ceiling grid, and just work our way through basically the whole entire, building. But there's certain areas that we want to start on that are, worse than others. So that's our goal. And, we would appreciate if you, give us some support, but that would make the building tremendously, look a lot better as people start coming back into the building.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don, very much. I appreciate it. And that is the highlight of all of, there'll be three other things I touch on. That's the highlight of all three of these things, is to make the building more presentable, to make it more useful as we, return to using the building. If there's no other questions on this topic, I'll move to the next one. We had a request from DTI to create a space in Legislative Hall that was more secure and also was not in the area where the server room is and is very cold. And so working with Janet Roberson, this location was identified. I'm trying to give this, in this shot, I'm trying to give you some perspective. If you look through the immediate glass door, you see another glass door. That's the JFC area. So the area that I'm taking the photograph in is this area that used to serve as a reception area for the Division of Research. It's now like a mini cube farm. There's about 5 or 6 cubes in there. Again, you see the ceiling tiles. What we would do, I'll give you a larger view. Again, this was a reception area. So there was an entrance from the hallway into the area, and then you could go in 3 directions. One leads to the bill room. That's the one over here on the right. One leads to the library. That's over here. and then there's one back this way that leads into the division back hallway. So we've worked with facilities again. We have a quote on basically at some point around the doorways here that you see, cutting the room in half to create a secure area for DTI. That is one of the requirements that Janet passed on us. It has to be secure. So there'd be a key card access, and the door that you see that's there, this door with the glass and everything would be replaced with a regular door. And instead, we would open up the library, going back to, wait, I've got one more picture here. Yeah, here we go. This area here in the library would become the door. So you would enter the library from the hallway from now on. This area would be a DTI. Half the room would be for DTI. Half the room would be a vacant room. Or actually, I think a little bit less than half. Any questions on that?
I see no hands raised.
Thank you for the help there.
Mhm.
All right. Third, we're looking to update the cafeteria furniture. The furniture is another aspect of the building that is older. One of the hindrances that comes with that furniture is it's not easily stackable. So when things have to be done in the cafeteria, or we use the cafeteria in other ways in the off session for storage or whatever, for things that are going on in the building, the setup in the cafeteria has to move. And it's hard to, you can't stack the stuff, and it gets shoved in places. So one of the, and this is minor, but one of the things is easier storage. So that's what we would get with this. In addition, if you can see the arrow, we would create some spaces, these tables, kind of like what you see at an airport, where there'd be more seating and also the ability to have power. This is one of the things, we attract many people to the building. There's not a lot of spaces that are convenient for the public, particularly in the electronic age, to charge things or use laptops and things of that nature. So we're trying to create a welcoming space in the cafeteria area for the public. I see the speaker has a hand.
Speaker Schwarzkopf. You're still on mute.
You're still on mute, Pete.
That's why I don't mute myself very often. The question I have for you, number one, is you're asking for 3 different things. How much money does it cost?
Yep.
And do you already have the money and all you need is approval from us to let you go spend it?
Okay. 4 different things. So just real quick, the fourth one is an update to the library furniture as well. Do we already have the money? Yes, we have money internally that could pay for these. I think there's also some thought that some facilities monies might be used for the actual facilities part of this, the grid. But we have the money, and I'm asking for permission to go forward with this kind of in 2 phases. Try to work on the most immediate stuff, the ceiling tiles, the change to the library, the DTI room first, and then the furniture later, because there's less of a need for that immediately.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions, I'd like to make a motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Wait a minute, I make a motion to allow for the legislative hall upgrades that have just been described to us by Mr. Catrona.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for ceiling tiles, secure space for DTI, cafeteria furniture, and library upgrades, all in light of the fact that we can land a probe on Mars. Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll? Danny Short, yes.
I would think it would be prudent that we know how much this costs.
Oh, yeah.
So I can give you the breakdown. The ground floor construction, that's the separation of the library and the offices, that's $31,000. The cafeteria furniture, that is 30. The library update, based on a preliminary quote we got before things went a little crazy, that was 12,000. I'm waiting for a final estimate from facilities on the ceiling tiles. I got a best guess from, or a decent estimate, I think, from Justin King the other day, in the neighborhood of, he was thinking maybe 45, maximum 60 for the ceiling tiles for the entire building.
Mark, this is Don Gerard again. We should have that final quote to get a little bit more hard numbers there, hopefully by the end of the week. So I'll them and see where they're at with that.
Thank you. And I apologize for not getting a firm quote before presenting this, but we do want to get moving on this if we can.
So something between 117 and 132, it looks like, if my quick math is correct.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Representative Dukes.
Yes.
Representative Dukes, yes. Senator Hawker.
Yes.
Senator Hawker, yes. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Senator Lockman, yes. Representative Longhurst.
Yes.
Representative Longhurst, yes. Representative Mitchell.
Yes.
Representative Mitchell, yes. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn, yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, yes. Mr. Pro Tem.
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem, yes. Representative Short.
Yes.
Representative Short, yes. Senator Townsend.
Yes.
Senator Townsend, yes. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 yes.
Having received the required number of votes, the Legislative Hall upgrades are approved. Thank you. Next, we go to Legislative Hall Building Committee. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your booklets or in the email that you received, you'll find a copy of a proposed House joint resolution that would create a legislative building committee for the purpose of studying and recommending a plan to address the technology, security, and space needs for Legislative Hall. I think we all know, since we're working at it virtually and everything, that we don't have enough space. We have technological problems, we have security problems, and they need to be addressed. And the best way to start to address this thing, because it's going to take years to do with any improvements that we decide to do, is to create a committee and start looking at these issues now, so that we can, at some point in the future, make some upgrades to the building or renovations to the building. But you can see in here the makeup of the committee, and this is just a rough draft, pretty much. And what I would be doing right now is to just talk about it here, have a discussion, and get the approval of Legislative Council to move forward with the legislation. So, any questions?
Do we have any questions? Senator Pettyjohn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the appointments here, it's the intention to have at least one member of the minority party as members on there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can spell that out.
Okay. Very good.
Other questions? So, Mr. Speaker, are you going to make a motion on this?
Good. I'd like to make a motion that the approval be given for the House Joint Resolution as proposed, move forward through the General Assembly process.
I second it.
With the adjustment as Senator Pettyjohn requested.
Yes, and yeah, we'll take
Right.
any and all proposals and suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Representative Dukes.
Yes.
Senator Hawker.
Yes.
Senator Hawker, yes. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Senator Lockman, yes. Representative Longhurst.
Yes.
Representative Longhurst, yes. Representative Mitchell.
Yes.
Representative Mitchell, yes. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn, yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, yes. Mr. Pro Tem?
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem, yes. Representative Short?
Yes.
Representative Short, yes. Senator Townsend?
Yes.
Senator Townsend, yes. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 yes.
Having received the required number of votes, the motion has passed. Next, we have the proposed constitutional amendment that has Doug and Mark on my script.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Thank you, representatives and senators, and to Mark. We're just going to come before you today with an overview of a project that I started working on when I worked for the Secretary of State for the last few years before I came back to work for the House Majority. We want to sort of present this to you, make you aware of sort of our reasons behind this effort, and, offer you the opportunity to give your blessing to this proceeding, if you will, and move forward through the legislative process accordingly. So I'll just take a few minutes to give an overview of what we're talking about here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who has done the drafting here, and he can lead us through what's in the proposed amendment and a piece of enabling legislation that would go with it. So in a nutshell, we have a plan to change some of the rules for how pending amendments are communicated to the public in the period between the two General Assembly sessions. Right now, as you are aware, that is something that's handled by the Secretary of State. But what we have, we think, are some compelling reasons why the legislative branch might be better suited to take care of this job on our own, and also bring the process into the 21st century in doing so, so to speak. So for one, Delaware's constitutional amendment process is really entirely a legislative process. There's no role for the governor. There's no role for the executive branch in proposing amendments to the Constitution, debating them or enacting them. That's all done, by the House and the Senate, except for this one small piece where the Secretary of State is supposed to publish a notice of proposed amendments. And from what sort of we can deduce, and I deduced from my time in the Secretary's office and learning about some of the history, this has been assigned to the Secretary because if you go far enough back in Delaware history, the Secretary of State was more of a legislative office, kind of served a role kind of akin to the House Clerk or the Secretary of the Senate, rather than a member of the governor's cabinet as we think of it today. We don't have that connection anymore. Sort of leaves open the possibility of a pretty serious oversight that could jeopardize pending amendments between that key period between the end of one General Assembly and an election and the beginning of another one. There are a couple of cases out there, pretty high profile cases, where secretaries of state failed in their obligation to post notices of pending amendments. One happened in Iowa where, Republican legislature, Republican governor, Republican Secretary of State, a law about an amendment to their constitution about the right to bear arms, and it got skipped, and they had to go back to the beginning of the process, and it caused a whole furor and an uproar, and everybody was pretty upset with the guy for having not discharged those duties effectively. More recently in Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State failed to publish a notice of an amendment that would have allowed survivors of abuse to seek a greater look back period in sort of civil litigation. And she resigned over that in the last few months. So it does happen, especially in places where, the legislature and the Secretary of State don't really overlap a lot. And there are a variety of ways that other states do it. Some states have a notice that's filed by the legislature. Some make the governor do it. Some don't do notices. All of those other states, except for us, don't have a way for the public to vote on a constitutional amendment. So that brings me to the question of why do we publish these notices between the two sessions of the General Assembly? Well, it is because we're the only state where the process of amending the Constitution does not include a vote of the electorate. And although the Constitution stops short of granting citizens the power to, adopt or reject amendments at the polls, we can logically reason that the reason we have this notification requirement and the reason it was written into the Constitution was with the intent of informing voters. It gives a voter an opportunity to consider how the candidates on the ballot might vote on the proposed amendment if they're elected to the General Assembly. Basically saying to the voter, hey, remember, the people you're going to elect, the people you're going to vote for today, they're going to get to decide this amendment when they go into session. So, cast your vote accordingly. We want to preserve that intention in the proposed changes that we have. We want to keep that in there. It was meant to be a way to inform voters about the consequences of the legislative elections, and the need for that still exists. That has not gone away. What has changed a lot since that provision for notice was written into the Constitution was that it used to be that the newspaper, your local printed newspaper, was the most effective means of informing the public and sort of inviting them to engage with the legislative process or the constitutional amendment process. And it's just not like that anymore. It's a little outdated with respect to current technology, the decline of local print newspapers. And, we did have another recent instance where some of that archaic language about newspapers and publication created a little bit of controversy. I don't know if you recall when the women's ERA was up for a vote on its second leg of approval. There were some folks who argued that because the newspapers that it was advertised weren't physically printed in the county, meaning like the News Journal printing press wasn't located in Sussex County, then the amendment advertisement wasn't valid and should be thrown out. Attorneys came forth and argued why that interpretation probably wasn't that strict, and everything went fine, and that amendment did get adopted, but it called some attention to that sort of antiquated provision. So to avoid those pitfalls, this plan we have helps us avoid some of those pitfalls, sort of respect the vast changes in the way that the public consumes information now rather than 120 years ago. We could allow for amendments to be advertised to the public in other ways, namely online. We think the proper place for that would be the General Assembly's website, with the involvement of the chief clerk and the Secretary of the Senate and the Division of Research, all of whom are on board with the plan. Also, we would want to loop in the Department of Elections and seek cooperation from the Commissioner of Elections to publish it on that website. He has also been briefed on this and is on board. But we also respect the fact that local news publications, even if they're not in a printed form anymore, are still a leading source of public information. So we wouldn't want to do away with a publication requirement. What we would want to do is set ourselves up for a time, maybe in the not too distant future, when a printed newspaper just won't be a widespread option to inform the public. So as Mark will explain, we have some sort of transitional type of language in these pieces of legislation to accomplish that. So with that, I don't know, Mark, if you want to go right into it, if you want to pause for questions here before you share the legislation, I'll defer to you.
I think we can pause for questions here if any of the
Okay.
legislators have it.
Very good.
I do not see any hands raised.
So just to briefly explain what's happening in the background here, based on everything that Doug mentioned, there would be two pieces of legislation to achieve this. The first piece of legislation would be an amendment to the Constitution itself, which would have to be published in the normal course because it wouldn't be the second leg yet. It would alter two things about the constitutional structure. Three. One, who does the notice. We would remove the Secretary of State from the provision. Two, we would talk about how this is to be disseminated to the public, not more than 120 days before the next general election, not less than 90 days before the next general election. Right now, the phrase is published 3 months. We chose disseminated to make it clear there could be other ways that you share knowledge rather than publication, in case that invokes in someone the printed word. We are in the 21st century, as Doug pointed out. There are other ways to share information. We changed from 3 months to 90 days originally, because 3 months, it is kind of not clear sometimes what is 3 months. So to be 100% clear, it's 90 days. That's easier to count. We wanted to make the window a little bit more flexible. So we put a front end. You can't do it before 120 days, but you have to do it by about 90 days. There's some Supreme Court case law on the 3 month language that I think would survive even with the change. And it talks about how there was an issue with a few constitutional amendments, first leg constitutional amendment publication of those back in the 70s. They were published somewhere between 80 and 87 days before the election. And the Supreme Court said that that was fine. That was substantial compliance under the law, and they found that sufficient. So I think that maintains even with the change, but this will give us a little bit more flexibility. It doesn't have to be the exact 90th day before the election. And then finally, and this is what prompts the second piece of legislation, is that we're going to say in the Constitution that you have to provide the notice as provided for by an act of the General Assembly. This will allow future flexibility. And right now it's 3 newspapers. And if by chance some newspaper that covered Kent County folded and there's now only 1 paper or 2 papers that cover Kent County, we wouldn't be in constitutional compliance. And so want to make sure that if that day doesn't happen, we provide some flexibility. And that flexibility is in the next piece of legislation. We would amend the code. We're keeping the high level concepts in the Constitution, the really important stuff, the timing, what has to happen, but we're creating that flexibility through a statute that will continue to require publication in a newspaper. And as Doug pointed out, would also require it on websites, the Department of Elections website, because if that concept of the voters are thinking about this when they go to the polls, a place they might look for information is the Department of Elections. And so that would be on that website. Again, with the General Assembly's website, it would be published there as well. A number of states that that provide notice also provide notice on their General Assembly's website. That's where that concept came from. And so those 2 concepts, publication in the newspaper, but this publication, just like it is right now, it happens 1 time. So if you don't catch those legal first off, do you read the legal notices section of your daily paper? I mean, how many of us really do that? But if you don't catch it on that one particular day, you've missed it. So this is actually going to provide more notice to the public, because now it's going to continue for the whole stretch of the election on the Department of Elections website, on our website. As I think Doug mentioned this, but rather than the Secretary of State being in charge of it, the Secretary of the Senate would be in charge of publication as it relates to a Senate bill proposing a constitutional amendment. The Chief Clerk of the House would be responsible with respect to an amendment proposed in the House bill. They would work together with the State Election Commissioner as well to make sure the notice is suitable. This is kind of a ministerial function that's going to happen among staff, and then a piece we have here as well is that notice be provided by them to this list of people that this publication happened. This is something that people in the hall often are looking for, this information. And so now there's going to be a requirement that this information get out there to the governor, to the members, and to the division and the state archivist, which is where it's housed now. In fact, I think through the Secretary of State's association with this. It's being handled by archives, so they're going to get that information still. Kind of just a technical thing. The enabling legislation won't take effect until the second leg passes, but it was thought to have these as a group go through the legislative process so that legislators and the public know what you're going to get at the end, right? So we're going to change it and say it's by law that the General Assembly comes up with, but here you know what we're going to stand by as the first take on this in this enabling act. I think I see the speaker's hand raised. I don't know.
Mr. Speaker.
I'll step in and help you out, Mark.
Thank you.
I think without any questions, if there aren't any questions, we should move to a motion
Thank you.
to adopt the legislation to change process. Notice of the first leg is of the.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Yes, thank you. Representative Dukes.
Yes.
Representative Dukes, yes. Senator Hawker.
Yes.
Senator Hawker, yes. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Senator Lockman, yes. Representative Longhurst. Representative Longhurst.
Sorry. Yes.
Representative Longhurst, yes. Representative Mitchell.
Yes.
Representative Mitchell, yes. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn, yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, yes. Mr. Pro Tem.
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem, yes. Representative Short.
Yes.
Representative Short, yes. Senator Townsend.
Yes.
Senator Townsend, yes. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 yes.
Having received the required number of votes, the motion has passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we are going to go into old business relating to legislative hall security, and we're going to need to enter executive session to discuss legislative hall security. Do you have any questions before we go for a vote on that? Okay, Mr. Catrona, will you call a roll on a vote to enter?
I need to make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I move that we enter executive session, receive a presentation from Chief Hertzfeld of the Capitol Police that includes a discussion of the contents of documents excluded from the definition of a public record under Title 29, Section 10002, subsection 17A, as these documents could jeopardize the security of Legislative Hall, and that the following individuals join us during executive session because they have a relationship to the matter to be discussed or are needed to provide assistance to Legislative Counsel. And that would be, and Mark, I know there was one substitute, correct me when I get to it. Deputy Director of the Division of Research, the Controller General, Director of Legislative Information Systems, Chief Clerk of the House, Secretary of the Senate, Chiefs of Staff for the House and Senate Majority and Minority Caucus, Chief Hertzfeld, Major Hunt, Lieutenant Simpson, Ryan Kelly at Vantech, and Alex McNeil, Rave Mobile Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the one correction and perhaps two, Ryan Kelly is not available. Mr. Hickox is here with us, and Janet Roberson is out today, and so Angel is here in her place.
Right, so give us some last names. Angel
Burock and Bill Hickox.
Right.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Catrona, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Representative Dukes.
Yes.
Representative Dukes, yes. Senator Hawker.
Yes.
Senator Hawker, yes. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Senator Lockman, yes. Representative Longhurst.
Yes.
Representative Longhurst, yes. Representative Mitchell.
Yes.
Representative Mitchell, yes. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn, yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, yes. Mr. Pro Tem.
Yes.
Mr. Pro Tem, yes. Representative Short.
Yes.
Representative Short, yes. Senator Townsend.
Yes.
Senator Townsend, yes. Mr. Pro Tem, the roll call reveals 10 yes.
Having received the required vote, Legislative Council will enter executive session to hear a presentation from Chief Hertzfeld on Legislative Hall security. For those watching on the YouTube channel, the stream will end when we enter executive session. Because there is no additional business after we receive the presentation from Chief Hertzfeld, and we do not anticipate taking votes on matters discussed in executive session, we will not return to public session to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Senator, please? Mark, our chief of staff is locked out. He was not allowed to into this session. He's listening on the live stream. So Dave Deputy needs to be allowed on.
Yeah, could you have him log in, and then I will have him sent into the breakout room that we've created. My apologies for that. I believe we tried to reach out. We were not sure if it was him when he came in. So
I just sent him a message, so I'll have him log in. Thank you.
if you'll bear with me, I will send you all into the breakout room here momentarily.
Mark, his last four digits are 4566. He's on a cell phone.
Thank you very much.